So I'm Maria Chenoweth, and I am going to be talking about our clothing. Um, it's a very powerful subject that has a great impact on people and the planet. So we all love clothes. We like to get dressed up, we like to get dressed down, we wear uniforms, school uniforms, clothes make us feel good. It's expressive, and it can create character within us. Fashion can be very exciting, and yeah, people love clothes. However, over the decades, our relationship, the human relationship with clothes, has turned into something really murky and rather unpleasant. So when I was growing up in the 1980s, most of our clothes were made in the UK. Friends of mine, their parents, they had clothing factories in London. And in the UK, we used to even sell clothes, make clothes and sell them overseas, which is called onshoring. So anyway, then something happened around the 1980s, the early 90s, when our clothing started to be offshored and made in other countries. In places where labour rights weren't so prevalent, and it was then noted that clothing could be made a lot cheaper, but that was at the cost to people. So then most of the clothing factories in the UK did close down, and this poor quality clothing was being made and sold and imported into the UK by big label brands. And I think, accidentally or not accidentally, this is like the beginning of fast fashion, low quality, bad labor rights, and high turnover. So the more clothing you sold at lower margins, then the more profit you made. And really, in my day, you bought a coat and that coat would last you for years. So people wouldn't dream of buying something poor quality. But here we are today with thousands of pieces of clothing being made, which we've now moved on to ultra fast fashion. And it's really, really ruining the planet, and it's really, really bad for the people that make our clothes. And yeah, it's the brands, these ultra fast fashion brands, just wanting more and more profit. So all this profit and money being made is just going to a small few people at the expense of lots of people and the planet. So fashion's impact now today. So an example of a negative impact was the Rana Plaza factory collapse, where over 1,000 people lost their lives. So people were forced to work in a factory that was poorly made. It was unsafe working conditions for people that make our clothes. And people still haven't received compensation from high street brands, the brands who are selling the clothes here in the UK. So that's one example of a negative impact of clothing on people, and that's a very small factory. Fires are prevalent. The impact on the environment, our relationship with clothes now is devastating. The fashion industry is the second worst industry under oil of impacting the environment. So yeah, tons and tons of greenhouse gases are released. It's highly water intensive. It's plastic, it's microfibers, and there's so much of it made that even once it's been made and its depletion on the earth, where do you put it? It's ending up in our seas, it's ending up being burnt, it's ending up in mountains in faraway countries. because so much clothing is now being made. So one really interesting stat is right now there are enough clothes on this planet to dress the next 6 generations. So that's your children, the next generation's children, and on it goes. We do not need any more clothes to be produced. So my journey in my life with clothing, it's from the 80s. You know, where there was fast fashion, but it wasn't that fast, to here we are to ultra fast fashion. I grew up in a seaside town. I used to just wear secondhand clothes. I loved slow fashion stuff that was made from the 50s. So I'm the CEO of Traid, which is a charity all about how our clothes are made. And instead of people throwing clothes into the bin, or the clothes they no longer wear, we get people to donate clothes to us, and then we sell them in our stores, which are based in London. And yeah, then the money goes back to the people that make our clothes. So, you know, we're a small charity, we're a small wheel in the cog, but yeah, we get people to convert from growing conventional cotton, which I'll move on to later. And yeah, we have children's centres in Bangladesh. And yeah, so all the money that we raise through selling secondhand clothes goes to do good work globally. But more importantly, you know, I think Traid was at the front of making secondhand clothing socially acceptable. We were the first sort of charity to have a different demographic and a different aesthetic. The way we look and our appeal was very broad. I'm also the co-founder of Charity Super.Mkt. So my whole mission in my life has been to get people to wear secondhand clothes. And initially that was just for fun, because it's a great way to dress yourself if you don't look like everybody else. But then, you know, it had a very serious note of, you know, the impact on the environment, you know, sweatshops. And so charity retail has been looked down upon throughout the years. You know, people say, oh no, not another charity shop opening. And so apart from wanting people to wear, as many people as possible to wear secondhand clothes, I wanted charity retail to become socially acceptable. So my sideline to my real day job is Charity Super.Mkt. And the whole essence of this is to get charities into the spaces and places that they wouldn't normally retail. So, for example, last week we opened a pop-up shop on Bond Street, which is probably one of the top 10 shopping destinations in the world. And so this is the first time charity retail has retailed on Bond Street. It's iconic, and we're in the old Phoenix store. This has never happened, you know, it gets lots of press. We launched a year ago in Brent Cross, and yeah, Charity Super.Mkt has definitely changed the face of charity retail, along with Traid of promoting secondhand clothes over new. So charity retail is really, really important. And so a few interesting stats. There's as many charity shops as there are fashion shops, like conventional high street fashion retailers. There's as many people work and volunteer within charity retail as there is the fashion high street retailers. But the difference with charity retail is it's using up clothes that are already made. We're not getting people to make more clothes and depleting the earth's natural resources further. And if you imagine, charity retail every year raises £400 million for good causes. And good causes are not something to be sniffed at. You know, one day we could end up, you know, being the benefactor of the work that charity retailers do when they're retailing to raise funds. So, for example, you know, we have Shelter, who They're working to address the issues of homelessness, which is, a huge crisis at the moment. We've got cancer research. They have nurses who look after people, and they do research into cancer and to stop this disease. We've got the Avon Wildlife Trust that does what it says. There's animal charities, hospices that look after people at their end of life. Marie Curie, which is focused on cancer as well. And the Shaw Trust, which is about getting people back into work. And of course, there's Traid down the bottom and Blue Cross for Pets. So when you go and buy your fashion and your clothes with charity retailers, your money isn't then going on to perpetuate fast fashion. Your money is going somewhere to help funding and to help people here in the UK and globally to have a better life or to do some good. And charity retail is the only place where this happens. It's such a huge industry, and I think it's such an understated industry. So Traid, what we do, so an example, looking more closely at, all the money that, we sell clothes, secondhand clothes. We stop those clothes going to landfill. So that's part of our charitable work to stop clothing waste and its impact on the environment. But beyond that, this project here, which is on the screen. We set up 4 children's centres in Bangladesh. So for garment workers, when they go to work, they leave their children home alone. It's very long hours. They were left on the streets. So to assist, with someone's daily working life, we set up these children's centres where children can get educated, they get fed and looked after, and they're in a safe environment. So that's helping garment workers. So these pictures are from our shops as well, trade shops. We also fund organic cotton. So what we do is we move people away from using pesticides and using interpest management system, which is more natural. You're just using pests and what is already on the planet instead of poisonous chemicals to grow the cotton that makes our clothes. And from this project, this is a small charity in London selling clothes, but what we achieved was far-reaching. So, for example, in Ethiopia, with the work that we do with the cotton, we got the first ever organic cotton accreditation in Ethiopia. That's like huge news. So buying secondhand, shopping in charity shops may just feel like an act of buying clothes or an act of dressing ourselves, which it is, but it also has far-reaching impacts. And today I read, that Shein is set to skyrocket over the next 3 years. Ultra fast fashion has to stop. So the only way that it will stop is through it being not produced in the first instance, and secondly, us not buying it in the second instance.